How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, today we're going to talk about hot car deaths, preventable tragedy. I covered a quick segment yesterday that happened in Texas where a mother called 911 to report that there was a chance that her two children, one was 6, a boy who was autistic, and a 3-year-old girl that could have been locked in the car and the car overheated. Now, both children have died, and there's just a lot of questions that are relevant to that case to be answered. And the most important one is there's a 5-hour gap. There's 5 hours from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. that she basically didn't know where her children are. And we covered some possible reasons for that in the episode we did yesterday. So I do recommend you check out that episode, especially if you're not too familiar with the case. But with that said, I wanted to do some research, and I kind of looked up hot car deaths. Just out of curiosity, I mean, how relevant are they? And there's a lot. I mean, you can go online and you'll see look before you lock videos, just a campaign, because they know it's a serious concern. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to research how serious it is, and basically the people that are involved, what kind of charges do they get? And believe it or not, that varies as well. I watched a great special. It's like a 60 minutes out of Australia that discussed 3 cases, which was very interesting. Found it interesting. I found it on YouTube. And basically, one, the father was responsible because normal routine, always takes the baby to daycare and then goes to work, but made the turn to go to work instead of taking the baby to daycare, and then found out later on that the baby was still in the car. And then there was one where the mother went to go pick up the baby from daycare. And then when they said, well, the baby never showed up, they run to the car and the baby was in the car for 8 hours. And it's a very hot day. And it talks about how hot the car can get, even on a normal 70-degree weather, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So, and again, for children that are under 15, or just for children in general, babies, toddlers, their body temperature raises 3 to 5 times faster than a normal adult. So I thought that was an interesting fact. So what I did was I looked up more about this campaign. So again, look before you lock. And then there was a thing called forgetful baby syndrome that came up in yesterday's dialogue. So I wanted to look that up as well. I mean, is there something with short-term memory lapse and being caught in the routine? But as I was watching all these different cases, it struck to me that some of the parents or the people, the caregivers that were involved, they are emotionally struck by what has happened. They don't look like they're bad people, but they made a tragic mistake. So it's something that I found to be very interesting, especially because how different courts handle it. Some courts handle it as maybe just negligence and they don't really push further charges, but some do push recklessness. And some of it could be based on the context. Like negligence could be being distracted and getting caught up and just forgetting that there's a kid in the car, kind of getting caught in your routine of going to work. But some of it could be negligence where I'll just leave the child there while I run into the store. Well, you knew what could happen. And that could be recklessness. So it's interesting in context how it gets interpreted in the court and what the outcomes are. So I just found some stuff that I wanted to read off to you real quick, let you guys kind of think on this. I think it's interesting. And I'm going to try to have a guest on at the beginning of next week to try to discuss this, because there's a lot here to discuss. But I guess basically just picture this. It's a typical Tuesday morning. You're running late for work. Your mind racing through your to-do list. You grab your coffee, buckle your seatbelt, and drive to the office on autopilot. You park, grab your briefcase, lock the car, and head inside. But today is different. Today your child is still strapped in the back seat. How does an ordinary morning end with a child dying in a hot car? It happens more often than you may think. So on average, 37 children under 15 die each year from heat stroke after being left in vehicles in the United States. That's just the United States. In 2024 alone, I came up with 40 children that lost their lives this way. It was like 40 or 39. That was the number that was going back and forth, but 40 kept on showing up more often. As we speak in 2025, I got 28 deaths have already been reported. So these deaths are 100% preventable, and yet year after year, they continue to happen. So I think that's a pretty relevant number. I think that's a number that I think is a lot greater than I thought it ever could be. My mind was blown to know that this happens more often than not. And a lot of it doesn't get national attention. So it's good to see this case out of Alamo, out of Texas, get some national attention now. Sadly, I think there's more to this story. I don't know if the hot car death was staged, but it does bring the discussion to the forefront of hot car death. So I want to take care of, I want to jump on that narrative real quick to get some thoughts out about hot car deaths, because I think the narrative is going to switch anyway. But with that said, here's what most people don't understand. A car doesn't need to be parked in scorching summer heat to become a death trap. On a seemingly mild 70-degree day, the inside of a car can soar to over 120 degrees within just 30 minutes. The temperature climbs rapidly in the first 10 minutes, then continues rising steadily. If you watch this video on YouTube, I would show it, but I don't want to get copyright strikes. It's the Australia 60 minutes hot car death, and they quickly show you how hot a car can get in a matter of minutes. And they even open up the door and just feel the heat. It's a great video. And here's the terrifying part. Cracking windows does virtually nothing to slow this process. Children are especially vulnerable because their bodies heat up 3 to 5 times faster than adults. Their smaller body mass and developing thermoregulation systems mean that heat stroke can set in within minutes. And once it begins, survival becomes almost impossible. And we're talking about hyperthermia, not hypothermia, hyperthermia. Hyperthermia is related to heat. When a child's core body temperature reaches 107 degrees Fahrenheit, their organs begin to shut down. That's why just in a few minutes, literally the time it takes to run into a store or drop something off at the office can make the difference between life and death. Because this heat, and you'll see it in this video, if you guys get a chance to watch it, it's 60 Minutes Australia, how fast that heat goes up inside that car within 10 to 15 minutes. So even just running into a store, that's not negligence, that's recklessness. So here I am. I know I have the kid in the back seat, but let me go run in and get something because I don't want to take the minute or two to unbuckle the child, put them in the cart, whatever it is that you got to do to get the child out. So that would be considered recklessness. The hidden truth, why it really happened. So here's where the story gets complicated and where our assumptions about bad parents fall apart completely. So when I was watching the videos, I noticed that there were differences in how people that have committed these acts have been treated in the court system. There's a lot of variance here. Some are more sympathetic, and in some cases they aren't. And there's a lot involved in that, a lot of context. But I watched a few videos yesterday where the main focus was forgotten baby syndrome. And there are some people that have utilized that have gotten away with lesser sentences because they were distracted, maybe caught up in the routine. That's usually the big thing, being caught up in the everyday routine and then totally forgetting the baby was in the car. And then obviously it matters on what you did the moment you found out. So again, a lot of these parents, they run back to the car, realize that they call 911 immediately. They begin to try to help the baby, but obviously it's too late, especially in the one case in Australia, it was 8 hours later. She went to actually go pick up the child from the daycare, and they're like, you never dropped the child off. And then there were measures, they try to put measures in place after that. So even though there's a tragedy, there's stuff that you can learn from, these horrific incidences. But then there's some where the mother just, hey, I'll be right back. I'm running in the store, leave the kid in the car. And when they come back, the kid's dead within a matter of 15 minutes. And they're usually a bit more unforgiving with that, even though the mother didn't want to kill the child. They kind of know that, hey, leaving the child in a hot car is extremely, extremely dangerous. So they don't always get away scot-free. there's recklessness there. So the majority of these tragedies don't happen because of neglectful or uncaring parents. They happen because of something called forgotten baby syndrome, a very real and well-documented neurological phenomenon that researchers like Dr. David, that's why I was looking up, Dr. David Diamond at the University of South Florida have been studying for years. I want to mention something, though, here. So when it comes to the forgotten baby syndrome, it really has to be taken in context. So sometimes people that were reckless try to pull the forgotten baby syndrome, but it doesn't work that way. It has to be in context. There are times where you're caught up in a routine and you do forget that maybe the baby's in the car. Okay, it wasn't your intent. You totally forgot. But unfortunately, there are some people that have been reckless, knew what they were doing, and then bastardized the forgotten baby syndrome because they used it as a defense when clearly you knew the baby was in the car. You basically thought it was going to be more convenient for you to run into the store, get what you got to get, and then run back into your car, and then you realize it's too late. So sometimes they've even said it where, you know what, I knew the baby was in the car. I went into the store and I got sidetracked on what I was going to buy and then saw something else. And I was talking to the clerk and I totally forgot for a moment the baby was in the car. Nah, that's not forgotten baby syndrome. And that's not going to be an argument that's going to hold any weight because your initial action is what matters. Sometimes it sucks when you have a valid justification and then people try to bastardize it as an kind of use it as an excuse where it really doesn't hold weight. But it sucks because then for the people that really do have that concern, they get judged as if they're misusing it. And that's kind of like the court system itself. They look for ways to get out of it when at the end of the day, that really isn't what happened. And now you're going to misuse that. And that's going to make us second guess. The public's going to second guess when someone has to really use it. We're going to think that they're misusing it as well, because sometimes these great laws are put in place to protect people, but they are going to get bastardized by people who look to manipulate it. So let me explain. So now this comes from Dr. David Diamond. So I do want to explain a little bit of what he said about how the brain works when you're under stress. So you're running on little sleep or dealing with a disrupted routine. That's key. You're dealing with a disrupted routine. Because how many times have you maybe had something to do before work, but you're used to driving to work, and you wind up driving to work and going through the whole routine, and like, oh my God, I forgot to do that, because you're on autopilot. Once you start getting on the road that's familiar to your work, you start going to work. So your brain has two memory systems: your conscious, controlled attention, and your automatic, habit-based system that runs on autopilot. So it's basically what's going to override the other. Under normal circumstances, these systems work together. But when you're stressed, exhausted, or your routine changes, maybe you're dropping the kids off instead of your spouse, or you're taking a different route to work, your brain defaults to autopilot mode. Because again, the way the doctor mentioned is you're stressed. So your body or your mind looks to ease things out. So it looks to pick up a lot of the function. So what it does is it picks up on what would be the autopilot. Hey, we're going to help you out here today. So let's get you going to work. But at the end of the day, you relax in the autopilot and totally forget that there's a kid or two that you have to drop off at childcare. So this is when tragedy strikes. Your autopilot brain follows your usual routine: drive to work, park, grab your things, go inside. Meanwhile, your conscious brain has already completed dropping the child off at daycare. Even though that never actually happened, the memory feels completely real. And I saw that in some of the videos where the mother goes to the daycare and then realizes the kid's not there. And as I said, runs to the car. They actually believe that they dropped the kid off. The first case in the Australian one was a father that does it every day, drops the child off, goes to work, drops the child off, goes to work. But for one day he kind of made a right, and they say that life changed because he made that right. And he went to work, and then he realized, like, I don't remember dropping the kid off. And this was hours later after he was talking to his wife. And that's when it was discovered that the baby was still in the car. So This isn't about intelligence, education, or love for your child. It's about fundamental brain function under stress. As Dr. Diamond puts it, any parent, regardless of how careful or loving they are, can experience this memory failure. It was very important that when the doctor was doing this interview, he wanted to make it known that it can happen to you. Even though they simplified an example, it's like leaving a cell phone in a car and then running back and getting it. It wasn't to equate a cell phone with a baby, but to let you know it's memory lapse. The term forgotten baby syndrome started appearing in research in the early 2000s through the phenomenon, although the phenomenon became more common in the mid-1990s when safety experts recommended that children ride in rear-facing car seats in the back seat instead of the front. I found that to be a unique connection. So again, it happened, they said the forgotten baby syndrome happened around the early 2000s. That's when they developed the label. Though the phenomenon became more common in the mid-90s when safety experts recommended that children ride in rear-facing car seats in the back seat instead of the front. This change saved countless lives from airbag injuries, but it also made children less visible to drivers, creating the perfect storm for memory lapses. So think about it. You're getting used to having the child possibly in the front. It's dangerous. We get it. I mean, we know these things now, but we were used to that routine. And now they said, no, you got to put the child in the back. You got to have the child facing the back seat. And now it's less visible. It's just not something that you are thinking of. Out of sight, out of mind. Let's see. Then you have other cases. Where is it? Hold on, guys. Other cases that involve simple miscommunication. One parent assumes the other dropped the child off. And yes, in a smaller percentage of cases, it involves deliberate neglect or worse. But the research is clear. The majority of these deaths result from normal memory processes going wrong under stress. Understanding this isn't about excusing tragedy. It's about prevention. When we blame bad parenting, we miss the real solution. Building systems and habits that protect against what our brains can get wrong. I thought that was key because people are going to make mistakes. They're human. And again, the death of a baby, I don't want to equate to a mistake, but it is a mistake. It just it's a mistake with a serious consequence. So with that said, we may wind up spending so much time saying, well, that's not a mistake. That's a horrible thing that you did, but it was a mistake. So in the process, while we're looking to hold people accountable or not, what are we doing to make sure that mistake doesn't happen elsewhere? Because there's a lot of people that would sit there and deny that could ever happen to them, that the parents were careless and that they were just reckless. But it turns out there's a lot of these cases. There's a lot of these cases that have hot car deaths. So with that said, maybe it is a problem. And maybe it's a problem that we as a community, which has been done, can step up and help. Because again, these parents, when you see them on interview, they're heartbroken, they're destroyed. It's not like the Emmanuel Harrow parents that we see who had no emotion, no tears, just kind of going through a script. No, these parents, you could clearly see they're devastated with it. And how they wish it was their lives instead of their kids. And it's like, well, maybe it was a mistake. And now at this point, if I could see it as a mistake, then maybe it's okay to draw sympathy towards them. I mean, yes, it's sad that a child died, but it was their child and it wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't what they intended. So maybe if we see it as a mistake when it's warranted and they really did forget, as you watch these videos, I do think it's highly plausible that maybe we can draw sympathy. And sympathy usually allows us to find ways to help each other. And I think the big thing about this was admitting that it could happen. And then you see all these changes that have come into effect. So I want to talk about the birth of Look Before You Lock. That was the biggest campaign that I could see that came up out of this. Even though there were some little ones, this was the main one. If you put Look Before You Lock on YouTube, you'll see a bunch of little, maybe minute or 2 minute videos, public service announcements. So by 2012, as these deaths continued to climb, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration knew that awareness campaigns alone weren't enough, but they had to start somewhere. They launched Where's Baby? Look Before You Lock, a simple but powerful message encouraging parents to check their back seat every single time they left their vehicle. The campaign pushed practical strategies. Put your phone, purse, or even one of your shoes in the back seat next to your child, something you never forget to grab. Set a phone alarm as a reminder. Ask your child care provider to call if your child doesn't arrive as expected. So now think about this. This is such a major concern that people are trying to come up with ideas to help you deal with the distraction of autopilot or routine. Put a shoe in the back of your car so you know when you get up, something doesn't feel right. Oh, let me go check the back of the car. Put your phone, something that you have to take with you, a briefcase, and if it is child daycare, maybe child daycare should know or should give you a call when your child doesn't arrive, especially if you haven't notified them that the child isn't coming. In one of the stories from, I think it was the Australia one, I'm almost positive, the child daycare providers also started feeling some level of guilt because they said we could have called when the child didn't show up. So they take onus as well. But the family also take onus. So they weren't pushing blame to the child care place. They weren't doing that. They took full onus of what they did, but they looked for ways to layer some level of protection. So again, it was interesting looking this up. Now, again, this doesn't really apply to the Alamo case. I really think it's going to be something a bit different because, as they said at the beginning, there's some inconsistencies. So, I mean, was it a hot car death? I mean, that's what we're trying to figure out. But I wanted to kind of borrow from that narrative just in case it goes off somewhere else. I thought there was some good dialogue here that we could share on this channel, why it stays with that same narrative. So these habits have generally saved lives, as we talked about, put stuff in the backseat of the car, etc. Parents are setting the phone alarm. Parents began sharing stories of how that extra glance in the backseat, even when they were certain their child wasn't there, revealed a sleeping toddler they completely forgotten about. Now, guys, we're not going to know of the success. We only know when it's not successful. So we don't know how many times these little things have saved lives, these little change in habits. But advocacy groups and safety experts knew that relying on memory alone, even with reminders, wasn't enough. The brain science was too clear. Under the right conditions, anyone could forget. So I wanted to walk us through how the crisis evolved and how slowly, a little too slowly, unfortunately, the system began to change. So again, we talked about in 2012, we had the NHTSA launch, Where's Baby? Look Before You Lock, focusing on potential awareness and habit building. Then 4 years later, now if you guys know more, let me know, but I saw something in between 2012 and, not in between. I saw something, I didn't see anything from 2012 to 2016. Sorry, there's a gap there. But in 2016, I did see that General Motors introduced a rear seat reminder on the 2017 GMC Acadia, the first system of its kind in the automotive industry. And it did note in the video I watched that it was the first of its kind. If you opened the rear door before starting your trip, the car would remind you to check the back seat when you turned off the engine. Other automakers began developing similar systems. Then in 2018 and 2019, the crisis reaches its peak. Both years see 53 children die in hot cars, the highest numbers ever recorded. The deaths generate unprecedented media attention and public outcry. Heart-wrenching images of parents in courtrooms, some facing manslaughter charges, others cleared because prosecutors recognized the tragedy as accidental. And it basically filled national headlines. In 2019, the Hot Car Act is reintroduced in Congress, proposing to require child detection technology in all new vehicles. Despite the record death toll and mounting public pressure, the legislation stalls in committee. However, it builds crucial momentum for future action. So that does occur, but takes a few years. In 2021, finally progress, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act includes a provision directing NHTSA to require rear seat reminder systems in new passenger vehicles, but there's a catch. The law stops short of mandating full child presence detection technology. Instead, it requires basic audio and visual alerts when rear doors are open before a trip. In 2022 to 2024, NHTSA begins the rulemaking process while automakers continue voluntarily adding more sophisticated systems. motion sensors, phone app notifications, and smart detection systems that can sense a child's presence. In the Australia 60-minute one, you're going to see one of the phone apps where when they leave, there's a noise that goes right on the phone of a baby crying. 2024, 2025, NHTSA finalizes a rule requiring seatbelt reminder systems. So compliance required by 2000. Some say 2027 is supposed to be full compliance, but then I saw an update that it's up to 2027. If you guys know more, let me know. And continues working on rear seat occupant alert requirements. Meanwhile, the death continues. 40 in 2024 was the number I got. That's a high number. That's above average. I think the average was somewhere in the 30s, the low 30s. And in 2025, the number I got was we're already at 28 hot car deaths. So I don't know what we're pushing towards, but it's just to know that those numbers exist. But if you guys know any more of these stats or have concerns with these, put them in the comments. These are the stats that I came up with. I didn't just go to one source. The timeline reveals a frustrating truth. While the technology to prevent these deaths have existed for years, regulatory change moves slowly and voluntary adoption by automakers is uneven. So when these tragedies occur, our legal system faces an impossible question. How do you respond when grief-stricken parents have already lost everything that matters to them? And that's where I saw a lot of inconsistencies. I saw negligence, recklessness, in one case manslaughter. So the criminal justice response varies widely across the country. Some prosecutors file charges ranging from child neglect to involuntary manslaughter or even murder. Others decline to prosecute at all, recognizing that the parents' anguish represent punishment enough. The cases that do go to trial often hinge on tiny details. Was the parent texting while driving? Did they stop somewhere they shouldn't have? Was there any evidence of impairment? These factors can mean the difference between a grieving parent returning home and spending years in prison. So again, texting could be a distraction. On a phone could be a distraction where you just shut the door and you leave. In the case of the one in Texas that we were talking about, there's a 5-hour gap, and we're wondering, was maybe she on something? How do you not know where your 6-year-old, autistic 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old, how do you not know where they're at? So we're wondering maybe if she was impaired. But again, we don't know. That's, but as an investigator, you're going to want to know what happened in those 5 hours. Then there's the Good Samaritan law. So in response to these tragedies, many states have passed legislation protecting bystanders who break into vehicles to rescue children or pets. These laws recognize that sometimes we all need to be our brother's keeper. But perhaps the most telling aspect of the legal response is how it reflects our collective struggle to understand these tragedies. When we can't accept that loving, responsible parents can make fatal mistakes due to normal brain function under stress, we default to blame and punishment. That's why I thought it was good to watch those videos, see the parents who went through this. I mean, these are parents that I believe, and not just me, juries as well, believe that they did not do this purposefully, that they got caught up in some type of distraction and how they feel after the fact. And man, they lost their kids. So I felt sympathetic. And at first I questioned my sympathy. Should I feel it? Because look what they did. I mean, but it's hard to say. The loss of a baby could be a mistake. And sometimes we have to see that as a mistake. And again, I get that mistake has serious consequences, as I mentioned before, but seeing it as a mistake, when you have the context that showcases it's a mistake, allows us to be sympathetic. I thought that for me was an initial challenge at first until I saw the videos, and the videos relate to something I believe I could have went through, but luckily enough, I haven't. So, it was good to have that level of sympathy. And then now that's why we have all these changes and more people getting involved, because people will realize, hey, this wasn't bad parenting. This was an honest mistake. So the question persists in cases of genuine memory failure: is the permanent loss of a child punishment enough, or should society demand additional accountability? And again, that's kind of what I saw in the different videos. I saw more sympathy and charges dropped, and then I saw no sympathy. And most of the times I would say the context did matter, but there were times where it was very similar. And They either held charges or they didn't. So there's a lot of inconsistencies here. So here's what the research tells us about prevention. And it's not just about individual responsibility. So for parents, make checking the back seat as automatic as putting on your seatbelt. Do it every single time you get out of your car, whether you think your child is there or not. Create physical reminders. Put your phone, purse, or shoe in the back seat. You know what's funny? Before I even read this, I heard of people putting their shoe in the back seat before. I didn't know it was related to that. Use technology. Set phone alarms. Use apps that send reminders or invest in aftermarket child detection devices and arrange backup systems. Ask child care providers to call if your child doesn't arrive as expected. Never leave children unattended in vehicles, even briefly, even with windows cracked. You know what's funny? In corrections, we operate in a layered system because we know that there's always going to be human error. So we always look to provide a layer to protect each layer. And that's kind of what you see here. You know, let's provide some layers. Let's put some layers in play here. So just in case all this fails, you know, what's the secondary layer? Where was the kid supposed to report to? Fine. Well, the kid's not there. So maybe someone at the school can call and follow up. And that's for many reasons. Maybe you need a wellness check at the home. Could be a lot of reasons. So those follow-up calls matter. For communities, if you see a child alone in a car, act immediately. Call 911 first and try to locate the parent. In hot weather, don't wait. Support legislation requiring child detection technology in new vehicles and understand that this could happen to anyone and respond with compassion rather than judgment when it does. That was my add-on thought because I thought of this a little bit less forgiving until I watched the videos and really got to draw some connection to the people who I really do think it was a mistake. So to look at them with compassion first before judgment. In the Alamo case, I mean, there's some inconsistencies, but I'm trying my best to be somewhat compassionate. But I have a feeling that maybe some people are very familiar with that. And that could be why they staged it with that type of context, because they know it could draw compassion first. So again, it sucks when compassion can be bastardized. So we become very protective of giving compassion. But with that said, in what I watched in some of the cases, the family did deserve compassion. It was a mistake that they have to live with for the rest of their lives. For manufacturers and policymakers, accelerate the development and deployment of reliable child detection systems, make rear seat reminder systems standard, not optional, and support research into better detection technology and prevention strategies. I wonder when people are shopping for a car, especially newlyweds or stuff like that, they're actually asking that question. Does this car have some type of acknowledgement that the baby's in the back seat? Just because it would be good to have. So that's good to learn. I learned that. These deaths started rising in the mid-1990s when we moved children to the back seat for their safety. That change prevented thousands of deaths from airbag injuries, but it created an unintended consequence. Children became less visible to drivers. This represents a broader truth about safety. Solutions often create new challenges. The key is recognizing these challenges quickly and adapting our system accordingly. The technology to prevent virtually all of these deaths exists today. Motion sensors can detect the child's breathing. Smart systems can send alerts to your phone if you walk away from your car with the child inside. Some systems can even automatically lower windows or turn on air conditioning. The question isn't whether we can prevent these tragedies, it's whether we will. Now, guys, I do these shows and I try to look for relevance in cases that are current because we can learn a lot from tragedy. It's just being able to open your eyes and see things at a bigger or greater picture. Try to avoid all the gossip and just really hone in on the facts that, yes, this was tragic, but the people that suffered, the victims, don't have to die in vain. There's got to be lessons here that I can learn. And that even in corrections, we go through all these crazy codes, but we always try to learn lessons from it, as hard as that may be. But there's always a lesson that you can learn when you make an intentional effort to look past the chaos. I just got a closing remark here. Let me leave you with this. Every parent who has lost a child this way was certain it could never happen to them. They weren't neglectful. They weren't uncaring. They were human beings whose brain, under stress, defaulted to autopilot at the worst possible moment. Understanding forgotten baby syndrome doesn't excuse these tragedies. It just explains them. That's all. An explanation is the first step towards prevention. If you notice, even in the shows I did in the past with Lakin Snelling and recently Christina Formello, that's her name. Lakin Snelling with the baby and putting the baby in the closet. We approach things from as objective as possible, even though there's a lot there that states she was very aware of what she did, especially leaving the scene and then coming back. But we try to be professional. I bring a mental health counselor on. And even for the Christina Formello, basically the teacher who was 28 messing with a 14, 15-year-old student, she's a predator, but we try to look into her history, what she's about. And again, it's not to give them an excuse, but rather to understand to some extent why they do what they do, because once you understand why, that's where the lessons are. I did a quick short recently about plea deals, and plea deals are good. It shows accountability if we have enough evidence and gets that person to admit guilt, but it doesn't expose the why. And sometimes people want that why. That's their closure. The closure's in the why, and I just think that's important. And this channel does explore that on so many levels. So again, this isn't about politics or blame or judgment. It's about recognizing that human memory is fallible, that loving parents can make fatal mistakes, and that we have both the knowledge and the technology to prevent these deaths. The question is whether we'll act on that knowledge before more children die. Because here's the hardest truth of all. The next parent to face this unimaginable loss probably watched this video and thought, that could never be me. But it could be any of us, which means protecting children from hot car deaths isn't just their responsibility. It's all of ours. Remember, look before you lock every time, no exception. Sometimes it's tough for people to embrace them. When you see these crimes or see these things that happen, it's tough for me to, do a video and saying, guess what? Maybe somewhere along the line, we're all responsible for this, for what happened. And that's a tremendous thing to take onus of. But I think it's also a tremendous, powerful thing to, once there's ownership, we start doing things about it. So, I think it's always good to ask, could we have done more? Even in things that, we're not directly involved in, things that happen miles away, but could we have done more? And usually the more, it's just about awareness, putting videos like this up. So again, remember, look before you lock every time, no exception. And if you see a child alone in a car, don't hesitate, act, because in the few minutes it takes to find a parent, a child's life hangs in the balance. These deaths are 100% preventable. Let's make sure they become 100% prevented. That's it. So guys, the reason why I did this video is I think it just provides some details, just some knowledge, some awareness. But I love your thoughts. And guys, please subscribe, comment, engage, and share the content. I would like to grow this channel so I can do more about, I like doing this. I think this was my calling. I'm going to be out of corrections within 2 years. I'll be retired, somewhere around the 2-year mark. And I would like to cross into this. I think this is an area I can make an impact in. And I can't do it alone. So it'd be great for some support so I can reach, a bigger audience. That's a goal. As always, guys, stay safe.